Reports are that this week, the NHTSA, or NHTSA, is going to be producing a report that's going to single out Tesla for their full self-driving and autonomous software and make it look like Tesla is doing a really bad job. But what they're doing is using really bad statistics, and I want to prove that to you once and for all. So let's take a look. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So I'm going to start with an AP article that's being reproduced in MarketBeat here. I'll leave a link to that in the description, of course. It says, U.S. likely to cite Tesla crashes with automated systems. I'm going to try to read this entire thing through without too many interruptions so I can talk about things a little bit more. But I'm a little bit hot under the collar about this entire article, and I'll get to that later. But anyway, so let's go ahead and read the article. And it's not just NHTSA I'm upset with here, but the article itself, and you'll see why later on. All right, from Detroit. The government will soon release data on collisions involving vehicles with autonomous or partially automated driving systems that will likely single out Tesla for a disproportionately high number of such crashes. In coming days, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, plans to issue figures it has been gathering for nearly a year. The agency said in a separate report last week that it had documented more than 200 crashes involving Teslas that were using Autopilot, full self-driving, traffic-aware cruise control, or some other of the company's partially automated systems. Tesla's figure and its crash rate per 1,000 vehicles was substantially higher than the corresponding numbers for other automakers that provided such data to the Associated Press ahead of NHTSA's release. The number of Tesla collisions was revealed as part of a NHTSA investigation of Teslas on Autopilot that had crashed into emergency and other vehicles stopped along roadways. Tesla does have many more vehicles with partly automated systems operating on U.S. roads than most other automakers do, roughly 830,000, and this is a rather big deal here, folks, dating to the 2014 model year, and this is also a really big deal. And it collects real-time data, Tesla that is, collects real-time data online from vehicles, so it has a much faster reporting system. Other automakers, by contrast, must wait for reports to arrive from the field and sometimes don't learn about crashes for months. So just to put that in perspective here, Tesla has automated data. If it senses a collision, it automatically updates that to the cloud, assuming that the person is given permission for that to happen, which I believe most Tesla drivers do. But anyway, so it updates that. It pushes that information to Tesla, whereas pretty much everybody else requires somebody to go out into the field, determine if the accident happened, whose fault it was, etc., and then probably actually plug something into the car in most cases to find out what exactly happened. Very, very different thing, not an apples to apples comparison at all. Back to the article. In a June 2021 order, NHTSA told more than 100 automakers and automated vehicle tech companies to report serious crashes within 1 day of learning about them, and to disclose less serious crashes by the 15th day of the following month. The agency is assessing how the systems perform, whether they endanger public safety, and whether new regulations may be needed. General Motors says it reported 3 crashes while its Super Cruise or other partially automated systems were in use. The company said it has sold more than 34,000 vehicles with Super Cruise since its debut in 2017. So number one, 3 years later, and number two, a factor of about 25 times less vehicles on the road with Super Cruise than with Tesla's automated systems. Nissan, with over 560,000 vehicles on the road using its ProPilot Assist, didn't have to report any crashes, the company said. So this is a much more substantial number, but again, I'm going to get back to this in a minute. Stellantis, formerly Fiat Chrysler, said it reported 2 crashes involving its systems. Doesn't really say how many cars it had or anything like that. Ford reported 0 involving its Blue Cruise driver assist system, which went on sale in the spring, so that's just a couple of months ago, though Ford wouldn't say if there were crashes with the less capable systems. GM said the 3 crashes that it was involved in weren't the fault of Super Cruise. It also reported 2 crashes that happened before the June 2021 order, a spokesman said. Several automakers and tech companies, including Toyota and Honda, declined to release their numbers before the NHTSA data is revealed. And here's where we get to not having a PR department, in my mind, is actually a bad thing for Tesla. I know it shouldn't be big, but whatever. But anyway, a message was left seeking comment from Tesla, which has disbanded its media relations department. NHTSA wouldn't comment on the data Tuesday. And this is where this article starts to go off the rails in my mind. The rest of the stuff is NHTSA's fault. This is actually the AP's fault. Raj Kumar, an electrical and computer engineering professor at Carnegie Mellon University who studies automated vehicles, said he wouldn't be surprised if Tesla was found to have had a high number of crashes involving its driver assist systems. Tesla, based in Austin, Texas, stopped using radar in its systems and instead relies solely on cameras and computers, a system that Raj Kumar calls inherently unsafe. Of course, he doesn't provide any data to back up this claim, and Tesla has a whole bunch of data proving that it's very, very safe. So, that's where things start to really go off the rails here. The system's computer, he said, can recognize only what's in its memory, which, again, that's pretty much any computer system. Flashing lights on an emergency vehicle, Raj Kumar said, might confuse the system, as would anything that the computer hasn't seen before. Might confuse the system. Again, he doesn't know. He's not working for Tesla. He doesn't have data. He's just making broad-based claims, which is coming from a position of obvious bias since he thinks that radar is necessary. He goes on to say, emergency vehicles may look very different from all the data that the Tesla software has been trained on. So again, I don't know why he would say that, because Tesla clearly trains on emergency vehicles. I know that they've had issues with that before, but they're improving this stuff all the time. But anyway, again, it says it may look very different. He doesn't have the inside scoop. He doesn't have the data, so he's just making speculations here. Continuing on, in addition to the publicly released crash data, NHTSA has sent investigative teams to far more incidents involving Tesla using electronic systems than other automakers. As part of a larger inquiry into crashes involving advanced driver assistance systems, the agency has sent teams to 34 crashes since 2016 in which the systems were thought to have been in use. Of the 34 crashes, 28 involved Teslas, according to a NHTSA document. NHTSA said in documents that it has received 191 reports of crashes involving Teslas on Autopilot and non-emergency vehicles, plus 16 more involving parked emergency vehicles or those with warning lights, for a total of 207. Of the 191, the agency removed 85 because of actions of other vehicles or insufficient data to make a firm assessment of the crashes. That left 106 that were included in the Autopilot investigation. It's really unclear whether they're talking about the June 2021 to June 2022 window or the 2016 window, so we'll have to wait for the report itself to come out. But it seems like they might be tweaking this data a little bit by making the window 5 or 6 years instead of 1 year. Continuing on, it wasn't clear if 207 matched the total number of Tesla crashes reported to NHTSA under the order. A NHTSA spokesman wouldn't comment. So again, we don't know if we're talking about 5 to 6 years or 1 year. So that's an unclear thing. The agency ordered automakers and tech companies to report crashes involving driver assist systems as well as fully autonomous driving systems. In defending its partially automated systems, Tesla has said that Autopilot and full self-driving cannot drive themselves and the driver should be ready to intervene at all times. The systems can keep cars in their lanes and away from other vehicles and objects, but in documents released last week, NHTSA raised questions about whether human drivers can intervene fast enough to prevent crashes. That's a rather interesting statement because humans are notoriously poor at intervening to stop crashes anyway. So, it's like human beings are kind of slow. Our reaction time is not designed for things driving at 70 miles an hour or whatever. So anyway, that does leave a really weird question in mind. It's like, well, okay, if the autonomous driving software couldn't solve the crash, does that mean that a human being would have been able to solve that crash if they were on their own? That's not a clear result either way. Continuing, Tesla's full self-driving is designed to complete a route on its own with human supervision, with the eventual aim of driving itself and running a fleet of autonomous robotaxis. In 2019, Musk had pledged to have the robotaxis running in 2020. That is true. He's definitely missed the time. What did he say? We take the impossible and make it late. I think that's his line. So anyway, it definitely, that's on Elon Musk and Tesla for over-promising. But that doesn't mean that this can't happen eventually. And then we end up with a bit of a doozy. Tesla's Autopilot driver assist system detects hands on the steering wheel to make sure drivers are paying attention, but that's inadequate, Raj Kumar said. By contrast, systems such as GM's monitor a driver's eyes with a camera, he said, to make sure they're looking forward. So first of all, the steering wheel thing is super annoying and it's actually really, really effective. Believe me, I know, because I'm constantly jiggling the stupid steering wheel. But number two, his data is out of date. If I'm driving my Tesla, if I so much as look at my cell phone or pick it up, the thing immediately goes like, hey, pay attention to the road. It's definitely looking at my eyes. So it's paying attention to that. This is out of date information. That's the end of the article, so it leaves it in a very negative sort of state. All right, before continuing on, I want to take a moment to look at Tesla's 2021 impact report, and specifically this page. This is page 85 on here. You can see Tesla vehicles with Autopilot engaged are about 0.2 accident per million miles driven. Tesla vehicles with no active safety, in other words, they're not using FSD or any of the lane assist or anything, are around somewhere around 0.75 accidents per million miles. And the US fleet is around 1.8 accidents per million miles. So you can just see from the graph, it's very, very much safer to drive a Tesla vehicle. If you're interested in a much deeper dive on this, then check out the card in the corner because I have a whole episode about this. So then let's turn back to this article. It says Tesla's figure and its crash rate per 1,000 vehicles was substantially higher than the corresponding numbers for other automakers. So here's the big problem. And this is called just flat out bad statistics here. Let us say, let's take an extreme example. Let's say that we have one vehicle that somebody drove 10 whole miles and it didn't have an accident. And we have another vehicle that somebody drove 1,000,000 miles and they had an accident. You're going to say, oh gosh, the maker of the car that person drove 1,000,000 miles in is a far worse car than the one the person drove 10 miles in, right? Maybe it's like, that person who drives it around and then they garage it for 20 years or something. So the car's 20 years old. It's had 0 accidents. It's like, wow, what an amazing thing to accomplish, to have 0 accidents in 20 years. It's like, well, yeah, you drove 10 miles on this thing, right? Whereas, as you can see here, that's actually below the US fleet average. That's actually really, really good if you've only had 1 accident and you've driven 1,000,000 miles in this vehicle. So yeah, that's a very extreme example, but it shows exactly why accidents per 1,000 vehicles is a ridiculous statistic to be keeping. It should be accidents per mile where the autopilot or sort of full self-driving or whatever feature was engaged, not accidents per 1,000 vehicles. And before people start to complain here, yes, I understand that this is not a great page either. What we've got here, the Tesla vehicles with autopilot engaged are more than likely driving on highways where there are fewer accidents than on city streets, right? So it's not an apples to apples comparison. So these numbers are going to be somewhat compressed in reality. But still, this is, what are you going to do? I guess the only thing you could do would be to say people in the same customer segment, maybe people who drive $40 or $50 or $60,000 vehicles and only on the highway, count those accidents versus each other. And it's probably going to be a much closer number than this. Of course, Tesla's painting this as well as they can, but it's highly doubtful it's going to reduce this number down to 0.2 accidents per million mile. That's very, very unlikely. So anyway, it's a bit of a ridiculous statement when you've got this many vehicles on the road and they could be driving something like 15,000 miles a year. That's approximately what Tesla says that their fleet average is. And remember, Tesla has all of this data at its fingertips. Most other auto companies don't really know how many miles you drive, and neither does insurance companies and all sorts of other things. They really only find out when it goes to a dealership or something like that to have, data read or something. Anyway, so they don't have nearly as good a knowledge as Tesla does. So to show what I'm talking about here, Tesla says that their cars drive somewhere around 15,000 miles per year on average. And the AP report said that there are about 850,000 Tesla vehicles on the road. So if you multiply those out, it's about 12.75 billion miles per year driven by Tesla vehicles. So yeah, they're more than likely to get involved in more accidents than cars that are being driven less. You also have to take into account that Tesla's fleet is much older, right? You've had vehicles that have had autopilot for 6+ years driving around still, whereas these other vehicle manufacturers like Ford is just this spring. So really, how can statistics be reasonable at that point? You've only had a couple of months of data at that point. So Tesla's got 6 years worth of data and about 12.5 billion miles driven, at least in 2021 or so. So we're looking at just massive amounts of data, and Tesla is able to immediately produce this data and give it to NHTSA where other companies are not so able to do that. There could easily be accidents that happen that they just simply don't even know about. So again, this is really bad statistics. It should be number of accidents per mile driven or per million miles driven or something like that. You should have a graph that looks more or less like this thing up here, right? This is what you should get per automobile manufacturer. I have a feeling one of the reasons why NHTSA is not doing this is simply because they can't. If you ask Ford, GM, Toyota, etc., how many miles were being driven on their autopilot software, they probably don't know the answer to that. They probably have a rough guess, but they really don't know what the answer is. And so this may mean that NHTSA is basically in a position where this is the only statistic it can produce, even though that statistic is a ridiculous statistic. because it makes it look like a company that has got 50,000 vehicles on the road driving about 12.5 billion miles per year. You're comparing that to companies with like 34,000 vehicles on the road, or other companies that may only have just a few hundred vehicles on the road. So this is kind of a ridiculous comparison. And of course, these companies, even worse, don't even really know if their Autopilot software was involved in the accident until well after the accident, if they're able to pull that data off the vehicles. So all of this stuff is ridiculous statistics. And then you add on top of that the Rajkumar, who just kind of says these blanket statements without any proof about it, even though Tesla, again, has this data and they've shown this data. That makes the article very upsetting to me. And again, I want to be very clear. How to Lie with Statistics is a very famous book that was originally published in the 1950s. And it talks about how you can, juggle statistics to make things look good. But what's going to happen here is that Tesla's going to look really, really bad in the eyes of the public who don't understand that, and they're not going to understand that these are not apples to apples comparisons. I'm going to quickly give you an example that you might find mind-blowing if you haven't thought about this too much, but next time you watch a commercial where they give you a percentage or something like that, or read a label on shampoo or whatever it is, just think about this for a second. Something can be 25% less or 33% more and be the exact same numbers. So let me prove this. Let's say we have something with 75 objects and something with 100 objects. If we divide 75 divided by 100, we get 0.75. Or if you subtract that from 1, of course, you get 0.25, which means 25% less. But now let's do the opposite. Let's take 100 and divide it by 75, and you get 1.33 or 33% more. So 25% less, 33% more. Do you want to make the number sound small or big? You just divide it the opposite way and you get whatever you want that pops out. So you can make the statistic sound bigger, like it's a third or 33%. You can make the statistic sound smaller, like it's 25%. So it's the exact same numbers. It just depends on which way you divide them. That's just a really, really simple example of how you can play around with numbers to make things look the way you want. And what I'm telling you here is that NHTSA doing this accidents per 1,000 vehicles, not accidents per 1 million miles driven on autopilot or assisted pilot or whatever it is, that is simply bad statistics, and it's going to produce a situation where Tesla is going to look bad in the eyes of the public. And this is a safety issue because Tesla is safer. Tesla vehicles with autopilot engaged, 0.2 accidents per million miles driven in all of 2021. And we're looking at probably on the order of 12 billion miles driven, something like that. So this is pretty significant data. Even if you knock this thing down to some extent and say like it's half of that, it's still far, far more than autopilot. And remember, for most of 2021, autopilot was being driven on vision-only systems. So all of this stuff adds up to say that it is safer statistically using data, really, no matter how you slice it. And if NHTSA comes out and makes this sound really, really bad, and the public reacts and NHTSA puts regulations on Tesla and says that we users are not allowed to use autopilot under many circumstances, that is all to the bad. That's going to create a situation where it is less safe to be on the roads. People could get hurt, people could die. This is a really, really bad situation. So I want to be as clear as possible that people should not accept this report as it's written and should very much complain about it if this turns out to be the case. Now, again, we haven't seen the actual report, so I should hold off until then. But if we see the report and they talk about accidents per 1,000 vehicles, you should all be up in arms about that. That's a ridiculous statistic, and I hope I've proven that here. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode, found it fun and thought-provoking and a little anger-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. I do this by myself and you all are my support. So thank you so much. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.